So I like to say there's three extraordinary parts. Any one of them would be extraordinary unto their own with my story. That and so there are three extraordinary. One is the depth of my background, a familial background coming from Scranton, Pennsylvania, where I had two grandmothers who lived over 100 years old, each next door to each other a lot of the time. Two grandfathers who were immigrant grandfathers. One became a doctor and lawyer. My parents, Maury and Sandra, were very, fastidious in their parenting and all this kind of. So, in those times it was very focused. I realized I had a lot channeled into me. And there used to be expressions like blood ain't mud and the acorn doesn't fall far from the tree, but a lot channeled into me in terms of family. And it was kind of an extraordinary, the length of my grandmothers and all this kind of thing, extraordinary, familial situation. The second, and what really, starts to get into why it became the most extraordinary story on earth, is that the storm that came at me, the level of opposition that I faced over the years, irrational opposition I faced, and vitriolic, is really like nothing you could ever find. And I think the third component, and I'll get into this just to give you some sense of what all three elements are, was kind of the tenacity and purpose that I put into offsetting this energy. And it's like when two great forces meet each other, Ali Fraser or something, but when two great forces meet each other and stand toe to toe for like 30 years in this instance, more or less, that, a lot of change came about, at least in my scenario, a lot of change came about. And that's also what makes it extraordinary. So remarkable is kind of like, that's the third component, the growth that emanated out of me, the strength, the purpose, the growth that came out of me. So I'll go into a little more detail about especially the second or third elements, one being my family background. Two was the storm that came at me. And it's just, I don't think, I marvel at times at how, irrational, how fastidious people can come at other people. It's why in my coaching and training work, I, urge people to develop their purpose, their goodness, this kind of thing, because, people who have purpose and goodness don't attack other people. Don't feel, and this is part of the psychology of our times. I think a lot of people just feel so insecure or harmed inside that they end up projecting that on other people and they're attacking other people. And I don't know, but I guess because I'm basically compassionate, basically empathetic, basically have a good innocent heart, a lot of people perceive that as weakness. And that was what the last 30 years had to turn into, is me pushing back and standing firm for principles and saying, no, it's not a weakness. And it's where goodness is strength, for instance, came out of. But, in terms of the irrational attack that came at me, I mean, I don't want to get a group, but, like I had a younger who really took a much different perspective from childhood. That family background I talked about. I was kind of generally the person who felt, maybe because my father put a lot on me, did what I had my teenage rebellions for sure, but I mean, and all that. But I mean, I kind of got the basic principles and felt, maybe I'm just compassionate at heart, that I felt we had a good home. We were raised reasonably well. It was Scranton of the 60s and 70s. It wasn't like internet. It wasn't like Star Wars, but it was, there was something basically good that I took out of it. And my brother took out this sense that like he had this awful childhood and my parents were bad parents and I was a bully. I mean, did I ever have some bullying tendencies? Yeah, a few, but I'm a good person at heart. I didn't want to rub his face into the ground or this kind of thing. But he took out of that, and this is kind of a thing, the affliction of our times, that people take these hurts of childhood and then forge them into like 50 or 60 years of wrath to share on the earth. And it's like, no, that's not right. And so he kind of, and then his wife, the woman he's with, she also is similar. I'm not saying it's like nobody has this. I mean, I think it's common, that more common than we think, that people take these childhood hurts. And that's, the beauty of our work is like to transform it into adulthood, that, people take childhood torch and get them like missiles, and projectiles, and as the term would go of today, weaponize them into other people. And that set off this firestorm. And then there was this whole thing about my grandfather's estate, this attorney bishop, and all these kind of things. But what came at me was this 30-year sustained wrath. Like, I don't know. And what's shocking is how many people will buy into it. So even though I've been in the greater Boston area for going on 46 years, it's like people, because there was a tailwind to it, people all got into it. And so when I say the most extraordinary story on earth, the level of wrath and irrational rage and animus that came at me was just like unprecedented for like 30 years. Now, what I'm getting at, of course, in my goodness of strength and my turning challenge into opportunity, because I had underlying principles, and because I had fairness at heart, and because I had goals that I wanted to achieve, I could not allow that wrath, to take me down. So I had to, I had to stand in there. My children's interests who were divorcing and all this, initially, and then it blossomed into all kinds of other things. But, my children were there for a long stretch of it, in terms of that energy, because that well into their teenage years, early adult. But, it's like I chose to take it on. And so you got these two, and that's why I say the challenges of the world are psychological, because clearly I was dealing with this lesser weakened psychology of hatred that was coming at me. And I had to, like, it's two invisible elements in a way that had to meet each other. And I had to stand in there and, and that the principles, and that's why I talk about, the acorn, the mighty oak was once a little nut that dug in and held its ground. And I had these principles of fairness, and over the course of 30 years, as the opposition didn't relent, I had to grow and grow and grow. And, it's, the agenda grew and grew, and I started to see the magnitude of the opposition. It wasn't just, family and people coming at me. It's like our legal system, because, when I got pulled into a divorce situation, our legal system, I'd been raised with a father, advocating civil rights, and traveled to the South and connected with the late, great Martin Luther King. And it's like, our legal system is broken in a lot of ways, or is harmed in a lot of ways, and lawyers can kind of come at you. And I took on those issues, and so a large part of my work now has grown onto this, this tort for the intentional infliction of emotional distress and stopping emotional abuse. And related to that is helping our courts come to a, realign, and God willing, I can do, come to a sense of fairness and equity, or you want to call it, or equality, but just basic decency in our court system, which has run out the back door. So it's like, these are the kinds of work that I'm doing. And all this came out of, the Gentle Genius coaching, helping companies, families, and individuals get to higher levels. Goodness is strength. It's a psychology that I put out into the world. The work in stopping, and creating awareness over emotional distress, emotional abuse. All this came out of that was the kind of process of coal turning to diamond. Just while I'm in this like hand-to-hand, toe-to-toe kind of thing, this change was coming out all over me. So, it's remarkable how I stood in front, somehow lasted for 30 years, and then did this transformation in my own life, which is the integrity of it all. And then, to expand it out into philosophies and a psychology, and saying to the world, beginning with our courts and, social media, wherever I can get the word out, that our psychology is off. That if we need to act with our purpose, with our goodness, communicate appropriately, all this fighting on this, people of purpose and, and determination, goodness, so do the work with us at www.theworldsgenius.com. People who with purpose do not unnecessarily, needlessly fight with other people. We're too focused on building a better world. And that's what, so I think it's the level, but the background I had with my family growing up, the storm that hits my life, and then my refusal to be knocked down permanently, knocked down a lot and get back up, but then the tenacity to go out to develop a purpose and a vision for humanity, which is why we're we'll take a look for restoring our humanity soon. But that's what it's about, and I just feel that what makes it the most remarkable or the most extraordinary story on earth is the level of all 3 points: the family background, the degree of irrational opposition that came at me, and third was my unyielding purpose to stand in there and create a better way. Thanks.